Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. A is back talking about books. I miss you guys so much. It's been so long, but just a lot has been happening in my life. Yeah, I'm back now, and I'm actually very excited about what we're going to be talking about today. If you have read the title of this video, you will understand what we're going to be talking about. It is Manacled by SENLINYU. This is basically a video on a deep dive into fanfiction. Why is fanfiction good? Is it bad? What's the stigma behind it? And I really do feel like there is a stigma behind fanfiction, and why this book in particular was so hyped up everywhere. Like, it has so many reads on AO3. If you don't know anything about Manacled, just clicked on this video, it piqued your interest, I will explain what Manacled is. Manacled is a Harry Potter fanfiction written by an author named SENLINYU, who wrote this on the platform called Archive of Our Own. It is a popular website where fans can write fanfiction about anything that they desire, and basically Manacled is a retelling of Harry Potter. It uses the Harry Potter world and the Harry Potter characters to tell this story, but if Voldemort had won the war. So basically, if you're going into this book, the things that you really need to know about are Harry Potter, the Harry Potter world, and The Handmaid's Tale, because this book is heavily inspired by The Handmaid's Tale, which is the Margaret Atwood book, written, I believe, in the 90s, and also the Hulu series, The Handmaid's Tale. Those are the things that you really need to know going into this book. I would say if you don't know any of those things, it's not going to be a really good read for you, to be honest. It is a romance love story between Draco Malfoy, and Hermione Granger. So it's a Hermione fan fiction. And after this book was released, the whole book was released, I think after like 2018, 2019, Hermione has been everywhere. Everyone loved Hermione. This made people turn into Hermione fans. Okay? I personally have never read the books. I tried to read the books last year, but I think I had the movie so ingrained in my memory that while I was reading the books, it was hard for me to imagine them another way than the movies. So it just never happened. If you're a really big Harry Potter fan, this could probably be a really good book for you. How did I find this book? Basically, if you've been living under a rock, if you're not on Book Talk, not on TikTok, not on anything that has to do with books, I saw that this got really popular on TikTok, and everybody was raving about it. Everybody was crying their eyes out. People always hear fan fiction and they think trashy Wattpad writing with a bunch of cliche scenes, but I think that this book in particular is a testament to how there's a huge stigma around fan fiction, because the writing in this book is so good, and I honestly believe that a lot of the times fan fiction might be a lot better, or some works of fanfiction, especially really popular ones, have the potential to be a lot better than even the original work that they're inspired by, because they already have the basis of characters, of world. It's basically the prompt for their story, for their original story. They already have the set ideas there, the prompt. All they really need is to put their own spin to it and create a reimagining of their own. And I think this book in particular, Manacled, is a testament to that. I think people hear fan fiction and they toss it aside, but this book in particular is a testament to the fact that there is really good works of art on these platforms. Archive of Our Own, if you don't know, it's basically like Wattpad, and Archive of Our Own is basically YouTube but in writing form. Authors release chapters every single week of their book, and it's just a platform where they can have a lot of people be able to read their book without a direct publishing company. So just like how YouTube, you can post whatever videos you'd like without having a production studio behind you, right? This is going to be a 3-part series. I'm going to go into my overall thoughts, and explaining the plot of part 1 of Manacled, because there is 3 parts to this book. And then after the ending of my third video / third part, I'm just going to get into my closing thoughts. Overall thoughts. I think the book really could have been condensed down like a lot. I think that is probably one of the issues I see a lot with fan fictions, is that there's a lot of filler, and they're able to have that filler because these authors release their books per chapter per week. So as a reader, if you are reading it weekly, it is the slowest of slow burns, and you're able to have, it's kind of like anime in a way, where there's a lot of filler episodes and it's just vibes. You go through chapter and chapter of the characters just interacting with each other, and in a fan fiction it's okay because these chapters are released weekly. You don't have the whole book all at once. Even though I read the whole book all at once, it's okay to have filler, just like in animes they need to release an episode per week, so they create a filler plot. I also would highly suggest you get familiar with the Harry Potter world. If you have not, this book will not be enjoyable for you because there's so much that has to do with the characters, has to do with the magic even, that if you don't know anything about Harry Potter, you're gonna be kind of confused for a bit. I was very confused at the beginning of the movies or of the books. Certain plot points that get brought up, I'm like, oh, I kind of vaguely remember that happening, but because I wasn't a huge Harry Potter fan, huge Harry Potter stan, then it didn't really bode well for when I was reading it. I think overall, this is an insanely well-written book. It takes a little bit getting into it if you haven't familiarized yourself with the Harry Potter world, but the writing is so immensely detailed, so beautiful at times, and the characters go through so much and have so much depth. And this does have to do with the fact that it's such a slow burn, right? There is a lot of filler. It's such a slow burn that you spend time with these characters and you really feel what they're going through. So I highly, highly, highly recommend, if this plot sounds even remotely interesting to you, to stop this video right now, read the book, and then come back, because whatever I explain to you in my explain the plot is not going to be nearly enough for you to feel how wretched it is of what these characters go through and how like horrid the circumstances are, because you really feel that through the writing, and it makes you understand these characters and how much depth they have through the writing, and you just understand them so wholeheartedly and who they are as people. There is a lot of trigger warnings for this book. There is R-word scenes, multiple, many of them. It's overall just really sad and depressing, so if you cannot do that, if you need happy sunshine, do not read this book. I would say if those things affect you, just watch this video. Hopefully, if you want to still know the plot, there's a lot of trigger warnings. There's like S-word slavery, you know, these women are getting bought, not really bought, but they are getting captured and sold into S-word slavery so they could have children because they are fertile. It's bad, okay? There's torture, there's claustrophobia, there is PTSD. Just overall, everything that the characters go through is so sad, okay? So if you can't do sad, just stay away. So this is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series, as I said, because this book is a freaking honker of a book. It is so long. It is written on AO3, the website, so you can only count up how many words the book has. But if you were to add up all the words and put it into page format, it has more words than Kingdom of Ash. Let me put that into perspective, okay? Kingdom of Ash is the Sarah J. Maas book that is about 1,000 pages long. 1,000 pages long. This book is longer than 1,000 pages. I'd say it ranks up to be maybe 1,200 pages. Okay, this is the freaking Bible. This is the Bible of Harry Potter, okay? That's basically what it is. It is insanely long. So be ready for that. I would say it's basically 3 different books put into one. There is part 1, the present, part 2, the flashbacks, and then part 3, back to the present. We are gonna be explaining the plot, part 1, which is the present day. Trigger warning, torture, death, claustrophobia, sexual assault, self-harm, and much, much more. Welcome to MANACLED, part 1, the present. In the beginning, we start off inside of Hogwarts, which has now turned into a prison. Hermione has been in Hogwarts for 2+ years and doesn't remember how she got there. All she remembers is darkness and being in the cell, the tiny, tiny little cell, and the only person she has contact with is Umbridge, Dolores Umbridge, who was the one who brought her there and was the one to bring Hermione meals. Hermione has been working out every single day in her little cell and follows a workout regimen just to keep her sane. Nothing but darkness. She couldn't even talk aloud to relive the unending silence. It had been Umbridge's parting gift as they dragged her into a cell and checked her manacles one last time. Then one day, after being in this cell for over 2 years, she finally leaves the cell for once. Someone checks up on her physical health with a diagnostic spell. Other witches and wizards question Umbridge because apparently no one has known that Hermione was locked inside of Hogwarts for so long. Hermione overhears all of this. It was apparently an oversight because the Dark Lord, aka Voldemort, would have seen her as a very important prisoner. It's then understood that there is a lot of gaps in Hermione's memory, and there's something that she's hiding within her memory that is blocked out. Hermione cannot remember a single thing. You were kept in sensory deprived isolation for 16 months. The fact that you're lucid at all is a miracle. The effects of such an experience can hardly be avoided, especially given the circumstances prior to your arrival. I imagined you studied some healing during the war. Yes. Then you know what a normal, healthy, magical brain looks like. This is yours. A simple wand manipulation drew the magically projected image of Hermione's brain into view. What are those? My best guess is that they're magically created fugue states. What? At some point during your isolation, your magic began trying to protect you. Since you couldn't express any magic externally, it internalized itself. You worked hard to keep yourself from, as you said, slipping. However, the mind is hardly equipped to handle such a thing. Your magic has walled off parts of your mind. As a result, it fragmented you somewhat. Normally a fugue is general, but these appear almost surgically precise. So basically there are gaps in Hermione's memory, as if she's blocking something. She basically gets an update about everything that went down in the 16 months that Hermione was imprisoned. I was a healer. I was in the hospital ward. So many people I couldn't save. I remember losing. Something didn't work. Harry died. They hung him up off the astronomy tower and we watched him rot. They hung Ron and his family next to him, and Tonks and Lupin. They tortured them until they died. Then they put me in that cell and left me there. So this is their reimagining of what happened if Harry didn't win the war. The whole time, Hermione is wearing these things on her wrists called manacles. She looks at them and they're basically small wrist bracelets that suppress her magic. Hermione's basically a muggle at this point. In chapter 2, she learns about a figure named the High Reeve. This person is basically Lord Voldemort's right-hand man. This person killed Ginny and has used the killing curse on countless of other people. And this is a very important and scary fact because if you don't know much about the Harry Potter world, the killing curse can only be used if you truly mean what you say. If you truly mean for them to die. And nobody in the history of magic can just use the curse all the time. It takes out a lot of energy from you and a lot of power. So the fact, and it drains people and it drains wizards. So the fact that this High Reeve can just use the killing curse crazily like that means he's very, very powerful, or she. Hermione asks who the High Reeve is, but nobody knows because he wears a mask every single time he kills people. She meets an old classmate named Hannah who does not have her eye. And Hannah tells her that there's something called a repopulation effort and basically they're going to be sold into slavery. That's what she's told by Hannah. There were barely any babies. Pure blood fertility rates have been dropping for years. There were few pregnancies that set everybody abuzz. Most ended up squib and got terminated before the end or miscarried. Magic is might, you know. He decided to start a breeding program with all these half-blood and muggle-born prisoners he happened to have on hand. Just us girls, since it's fate worse than death to have a muggle-born male touch a pure-blood female. Worse, we're all going to be made to produce babies until our uteruses give out. And Hermione, after getting out of the cell, she's taken to Voldemort, who just really wants to get into Hermione's head. Hermione is the last known surviving member of the Order, so she is very important. Nobody has seen her for years. Umbridge kept her locked away. She's the last surviving member, okay? And there's something she's hiding. Even she doesn't know what she's hiding, but she's hiding something. And Voldemort just wants to get inside her head, wants to know what these cracks in her memories are. He wants to know what she's hiding. They find out that magic is at work. Those cracks in her head are basically due to the work of occlumency. occlumency. I'm gonna call it occlumency, okay? It's basically when you can dissociate, kind of, like you can compartmentalize things, and she basically did that to herself in the cell. Voldemort says this: more vitally, a great many memories from the war, particularly near the end, are the things that are being hidden. This memory loss occurred after Potter's death, after the war ended. What is it that she would be hiding? So this is the mystery of the whole book that you're getting. So after Voldemort finds this out, one of the mind healers suggests something that might bring back Hermione's memory, which is magical pregnancy. It might unlock her memories because magical pregnancy has the ability to break through magical fugue states, which is what Hermione has. Healer Stroud, who's the main healer, says there are a few cases on record which indicates that such pregnancies have an ability to break through magical fugues. The magic of a child is compatible but dissimilar enough to its mother to have a corroding effect on built-up magic. It's nothing conclusive given the rarity. If possible, however, Miss Granger has an exceptional magical ability. You yourself noted this and wanted her included in the repopulation effort. If you leave her within the program, there's a chance that a pregnancy may result in unlocking her memories. He suggests this. Voldemort likes the idea and pairs her with the High Reeve to have a forced pregnancy. Stroud, who's the main healer, is supposed to get her ready and prepped for the next 2 weeks before she starts fulfilling her duties to the High Reeve. You know what fulfilling her duties means. Property of the High Reeve was ingrained into her manacles, and the manacles not only took away her magical abilities, but it also prevented her from doing things. So suicide, which Hermione was contemplating, was out of the question. The manacles also stopped girls from committing acts of violence against others and themselves. They were trained for a while, ingraining compulsions into their minds within these next 2 weeks. You will be quiet, you will be obedient, you will not hurt anyone, you will not offend anyone, you will not resist when bedded. After being bedded, you will not move for 10 minutes. You will do everything to get pregnant quickly and produce healthy children. She was dressed in bright red dress and a bonnet, just like in The Handmaid's Tale, and she's taken to the High Reeve's house. Gets popped into the High Reeve's house. The High Reeve is Draco Malfoy. So Hermione, in her head right now, she's stuck, doesn't know what to do, and her one plan is to either find a way to escape or trick Malfoy into killing her so that she can just die and be done with this horrible situation. She reminisces about the last time she's seen Malfoy, which was in 5th year. Now he's evil. He's married to this blonde girl named Astoria, and he's a mass murderer for Voldemort. And he's one of the most powerful magical figures in the wizarding world as of now. The list of rules to keep Hermione healthy to have a baby: there's no cursing, torturing, or abusing her. She needs to be kept fed. No more than 6 hours of work a day and 1 hour minimum outside. This is to maintain her health so that she can have a healthy pregnancy and conception, so at least she will physically be safe. Mentally, not so sure. It seems like Astoria and Malfoy don't really like each other that much. They bicker a lot. Their marriage was an arranged marriage by the Dark Lord himself. Hermione comes into the Manor, Malfoy Manor, goes into her room and just looks around, takes a look around, examines it, sees that there's a lot of protective charms around it. Malfoy's just been very thorough with keeping her locked in there and puts a lot of protective words around it. As she explores, she finds out that being imprisoned for the 16 months that she was at Hogwarts has caused her to have anxiety. And when she opens the door to the hallway from her room, it's scary. There's just so much space. It's so open, and she panics. She's hyperventilating. She freezes. Even if there was a means of escape for Hermione, it seems kind of unknown now, because every time that she would try to leave the room, Hermione would just feel like she would freeze and she would panic. So it has to do with her isolation period. The terror coursing through her body had frozen her. It was a hallway, just a hallway, she told herself. She was allowed to be there. There were no commands holding her back, just herself. After standing there for several minutes, trying and failing to force herself to move, she abruptly sobbed and huddled closer to the door. She couldn't remember the last time she had cried. Long ago in her cell, as she stood there shaking and hyperventilating in the hallway of the empty wing of the manor, she cried. Over everyone who was dead now, for everyone Malfoy had killed, for all the girls back at Hogwarts being sent out into the world of horror. Out of rage over the manacles locked around her wrists, and the manacles she found had somehow locked around her own mind. She went back into her room, closed the door, sank onto the floor, and kept crying. Hermione just has so much sorrow in her heart, and she's grieving the loss of all of these people, of Ron, Harry, everybody. All of her friends are dead. She's the only one left who's alive. Harry's blank green eyes, Hermione saw them every time she closed her own. The expression on his face, the realization he had failed and had been written into it in death. Hermione shook as she thought about it. Her best friends had died before her eyes. By some extra cruel twist of fate, she hadn't been allowed to follow them. They had left her behind. So all she wants to do now is just die. Another little detail that they put into the book is that none of the girls who get sold off are allowed to wear underwear because they have to remain accessible, which is disgusting. Okay, that's nasty. Then it was the day. The day had finally come where Hermione is in her fertile period. We all know what that means. She would be R-worded by Malfoy. He conjures up a table and made her bend over it. He magically lubes her up, and then he did it. And it was very distant the way he did it. He didn't touch her anywhere else besides where they were meeting. After he had done it, he yelled at her to get out, but she physically could not move because she was compelled to stay in place 10 minutes after the deed was done. So he yells at her to get out. Then the fucking bitch-ass bitch, Malfoy, magically removes the table and she falls on the floor, hits her head, and she runs back to her room. On the way back to her room, she sees the balcony and tries to jump off of it to kill herself. Malfoy catches her, and the Dark Lord still wants to know what she's hiding. Malfoy, the reason why Hermione was paired up with him is that he is Legilimen's, I don't know. Basically, he can read through people's minds. That's the reason why they paired her with him, because he, like Voldemort, can insert himself into other people's minds. So he dives into her mind right after being R-worded by him, right after trying to kill herself, and then tries to look through her locked memories. So not only was she immediately physically R-worded, right after she was mentally R-worded, because it hurts. It hurts when people try to rip through your mind. Once upon a time, there had been a girl who had fought, who believed that books and cleverness and friendship and bravery could overcome all things. But now, that girl was gone. She'd been all but killed during the war. Now, Draco Malfoy had stomped that girl to dust over the course of an evening. He'd physically and mentally hurt every last shred of that girl to death. Days passed. Hermione can't get out of her room. She's still scared to go down the hallway. Malfoy has to remind her that she's supposed to go outside for an hour every day. And on the way out of the house, she sees a newspaper, and she doesn't know anything about the outside world right now. She doesn't even know what day it is. And she sees the headline. The headline basically is her. She is the headline that says she's one of the first people to be part of the Dark Lord's repopulation effort. And Hermione realizes that they were using her as bait for any remaining Order members who might exist, who might try to come save her, if that makes sense. Some days later, she tries to go out again, has a panic attack. Malfoy asks about it because she's supposed to have that hour a day. So he goes out with her on her little walks. And on this walk, it's so open. There's so much going on. Malfoy asks her about her panic attacks, and she says that she thinks she has agoraphobia. She says something about open spaces makes me panic. So Stroud, who is the main healer, comes to check in on Hermione. Stroud comes a lot to do updates. She was physically 5 times at this point and mentally twice. through the legilimency, bruh, I don't know what they fucking call it, but it's basically the mind reading shit. Hermione finds out how Malfoy killed Dumbledore in the 6th year by using the killing curse to his back. She gets a faint memory of Harry in her dreams, and some memories come back to her, but Hermione still doesn't remember anything. Malfoy comes in later and gives her a potion so that she feels nothing, so that she doesn't panic, doesn't have any anxiety. It basically makes her feel nothing. The manacles also are connected to Malfoy, so Malfoy can kind of read her mind in that way. Time moves on. It's now been 2 months since she's entered Malfoy's manor. She is due to go see Voldemort again. There, he breaks into her mind. Hermione asks if the torture that she just experienced with Voldemort, if Malfoy has been through the same thing, because apparently Voldemort does this with all of his subjects, and finds out that the torture, the legilimency that Hermione goes through, Malfoy also goes through with the Dark Lord, and they just get to talking more. She asks what day it is, and it just puts into perspective how much Hermione has gone through, how much she doesn't know about what's going on, and how secluded she is. Malfoy agrees to give her the daily newspaper every single day so that she has something to read. Days pass after reading the newspaper. She folds them into paper cranes, but she doesn't remember where she got the paper crane idea from, because Hermione just doesn't remember things. And she remembers making paper cranes, remembers how to make them, doesn't remember where or who gave her that idea. Days later, a man named Montague enters her room. He knows her. She does not remember him. But apparently they have a past, and there's a lot of protective wards around Hermione's room. So Montague enters it, really curious about her, and Hermione's scared. This is like a strange man, doesn't know this man. But Malfoy intercepts, brings Montague back to the main part of the house. Hermione sees, oh, there's like a party going on. So she sneaks out of her room that night, overcomes her fear, and kind of explores the party. So mind you, Hermione is also kind of drugged up, can't feel anything. She catches Astoria, which is Malfoy's wife, cheating on him with an unknown figure in the hallway. Draco was an enigma. There were so many contradictions swirling beneath his cold facade. What were his ambitions? 22, 24, 26, 28. He seemed to be accumulating power without having any specific purpose for it. He knew he was shackled by orders he couldn't disobey, marry Astoria, sully his bloodline with half-bloods, keep Hermione under constant supervision. He followed Voldemort's commands with devotion despite having no apparent taste for them. What did he get from it? What was it that drove him? His power and status seemed pointless. He didn't seem to be getting anything from it that he wouldn't have as a mid-tier Death Eater. So this is kind of Hermione psychoanalyzing Draco. What are his motivations? It's still very, very unknown. We just know that he is one of the most powerful wizards in the wizarding world as of this point. But there is no motive for why he wants this power. Is he a replica of Voldemort? Does he just want to be like him or want to take over him, be the next High Lord? We don't know. We don't know anything about Draco's motives, and this is kind of what Hermione has been contemplating. Throughout all of the anxiety attacks and panic attacks and just living a horrible life, the potion that Malfoy gave her to stay calm also has really, really bad side effects. So they just make her feel very horrible, and there's basically a come down to it. Starts vomiting. She starts getting really nauseous. It's basically withdrawal symptoms. So Hermione tries to stop taking it. As the story progresses, Hermione also gets another memory of her and Ginny. And it's basically Ginny asking Hermione if she's ever been involved with anybody. So this is a memory that happened maybe 2+, 3+ years ago of Ginny telling Hermione that she looks like she's lonely, asking her if she's been involved with anybody. Ginny thinks that Hermione's involving herself with Snape because they hang out a lot apparently in the past, but we just don't know anything about it. Ginny says this: I think of it every time I'm in there, in the field. Everything is so focused. Even when someone's injured, you just apparate them away and then head back. You win some, you lose some, you get hit sometimes, you hit back. and you get days to recover if it's bad, or if your dueling partner dies. But in the hospital ward, every battle looks like losing. I'm always more traumatized after being in there than I am of fighting. So this is something that we kind of get a little insight as to what Hermione has to experience every single day. This is in her past memories that she still hasn't unlocked yet, still doesn't really know, but you can kind of see the sadness with Hermione, sadness in her eyes, and Ginny in this flashback just wants Hermione to have somebody to talk to, and notices that Hermione has just been really sad. And it's because everybody in a war sees the military as the heroes, right? They see Harry Potter as the leader of this revolution, of this rebellion, and the actual action. They see all of those people as the heroes. Whereas I think, especially in this story, it is kind of talking about how the healthcare industry, even in our own society, is very much underappreciated because there's so many traumatic things that happened. The hospital ward is a battlefield within itself, and that is what Hermione went into. And it's something that is so important. When you go into the hospital, these are the people who are helping keep the soldiers who are fighting for you alive. Hermione in the past saw that where they needed a lot of people, and that's why Hermione, instead of going into the defensive part where all of her friends were, where Ron, Harry, Ginny, everybody, all of her friends went into the action, went into the battle, Hermione kind of drifted apart and separated ways by going into the healthcare field because she saw that that is where she was needed most and they needed the most assistance. Then there's word that Dolores Umbridge, she sees on the newspaper, the same bitch who had Hermione hidden in Hogwarts for over a year in prison, in isolation where nobody knew that she was there, was killed during an attempted assassination against Voldemort, against the Minister of Magic. She was shot in the chest where it hit a necklace that slowed the bleeding, and then when they pulled the arrow that shot her in the chest out, she died instantly. It also hit that necklace. Stroud comes back later on to check in on Hermione, and it doesn't seem like Hermione is pregnant yet, even after being there for months and months and months and being great many times over many months. And so Stroud gives Hermione a new fertility potion that will make things easier. That is what Stroud says. No idea what that means. It's basically a repeat of the same things. Hermione goes to Voldemort again. Voldemort looks through her memories. Maybe time has allowed some memories to come back. And it's also revealed that in the time that Hermione doesn't remember, apparently Hermione attacked a prison in Sussex after Harry had died. And this thing was a very big explosion where a lot of people died, and nobody understands how just Hermione could be a part of this explosion and this bombing that happened and how she was able to do it. But apparently that is what she did. That's what is revealed when she goes talk to Voldemort. Later after that, Hermione gets talking with Malfoy again, and Hermione puts some pieces together. She notices some things. One of the things is that in Voldemort's campaign to be a leader has progressed after Harry had died. And then connecting more pieces, she realizes that there was something connecting them, something connecting Harry and Voldemort. And that when Harry died, a piece of Voldemort died too. Basically, if you read the Harry Potter books or watched the movies, he's a Horcrux, right? This universe they don't know about. Hermione puts together that Voldemort's weak, and that the repopulation effort, basically graping all of these girls and putting them into escort slavery, is a ruse to cover the fact that Voldemort is dying. And Hermione thinks back to what she does remember. She gets home, she does some thinking. She thinks about how she drifted away from her friends during the war, became a healer instead of an active fighter. She thought that healing is where she was needed most, and she reflects that maybe if she went down the other path, things could have been different. A lump formed in her throat as she replayed Malfoy's taunts from months before. You didn't even fight during the war, did you? I certainly never saw you. You weren't ever out there with Potter and Weasley, you just hid. Spending all your time in hospital wards, waving your hand about futilely saving people who ended up better off dead. She swallowed hard and pressed her lips together into a hard line as she stepped out of the shower and toweled off. She paused a moment and stared at her reflection. She hated her reflection. hated seeing it. She tried to avert her eyes whenever she encountered a mirror. She barely recognized the person she found in the glass. She looked healthy, pretty even, normal, like a Hermione from a different life. But her eyes were dead. There was no fire in them. The spark that she regarded as most intrinsic to who she was had gone out. She was a vibrant corpse. She turned away from the mirror and dressed. But yeah, that's kind of what Hermione's going through. She hates herself. She wants to die. She wants to kill herself. Can't. All her friends are dead, and it's just depressing as fuck, okay? Astoria is hosting a party later that night, so Hermione sneaks out and eavesdrops. So it's in the maze outside of the manor where Hermione likes to take her walks. She hears disgusting talk about the other women who got sold off, how they might be doing from the people who were at this party, because all these people are leaders just like Malfoy. They all have an S-word slave. It puts it into perspective for her about how, in a way, obviously Hermione's not lucky, but in a way, she's lucky comparatively to the other girls because Malfoy has been very distant from Hermione and only uses her during the times where she's fertile and leaves her alone for everything else. Apparently that makes her lucky because she's not being R-worded 24/7 and humiliated. And Hermione's still in the bushes when, as she's eavesdropping, boom! Graham Montague, the guy who came into her room earlier and was interested in her, apparently he knew her, catches her hiding. He gropes her. He says nasty stuff to her. He says, "You were supposed to have been mine, you know." Stepping back slightly to look over her again. "I was the one who caught you when you attacked Sussex. When I saw you standing under a sky full of burning dementors, I wanted to right there in that field." He gripped her breast tightly as he spoke, his fingers digging into the flesh. If Hermione could have moved at all, she would have been gasping from pain. "That was how I earned my mark, you know, catching you. My exceptional service to the Dark Lord. When I saw you at Sussex, I recognized you from the cave. Remember how I told you I'd asked to have you? I was the one who reminded the Dark Lord about you for the breeding program. He said you'd be mine, but then he changed his mind and gave you to Malfoy. We don't want Malfoy to come interrupt our fun now, do we?" Confundo. Hermione's mind blurred as the immobilizing hex was removed and she collapsed into his waiting arms. Graham immobilizes her and harasses her. Then he starts to assault her. And she could not move. She could not scream. She could not do anything to stop him. As this is happening, luckily it doesn't get to penetration, but she hears Malfoy, and Malfoy throws Montague off of her. He's so mad. This man is feral. I'm talking about Malfoy, okay? He is mad. He literally takes Montague's organs out of his body and lets them hang. That's how mad he is. Malfoy is furious, helps Hermione get cleaned up, and offers her calming draught and dreamless sleep potion for the next couple of weeks to calm her and to get her mind off of this horrible ordeal. Astoria later barges into her room angry. A few days later, she shows Hermione the Daily Prophet. And apparently, Malfoy had publicly killed Montague. Taking out the organs, that didn't kill him. He was in the hospital. And now, Malfoy visited him at the hospital and publicly killed Montague. We get Astoria's motives and backstory a little bit. And basically, we realize that Astoria is so mad and she's so jealous of Hermione. "I tried to be the perfect wife when I was chosen. Draco Malfoy's wife. There was really nothing to compare it to. The most powerful general in the Dark Lord's army. All the other girls were so jealous. Of course it was arranged, but I thought he'd eventually realize that I was right for him. That I was a good wife, that I did everything. I joined every board, every charity. I was the perfect wife. I was perfect. But he never cared." Astoria shrugged and gestured carelessly with her wand hand. Her nails were painted silver and caught in the light. "People don't know, but he didn't even live here. We got married and he just left me here in this house. Never so much as gave me a tour of the manor, and on our wedding day, he brought me here and left me in the foyer. Didn't bother to consummate it until I was supposed to be fertile. Then Once the healers determined I was barren, Draco didn't come here at all. He just disappeared. I never knew where he was. I couldn't contact him. I thought maybe I could get his attention if I made him jealous, but he never cared what I did. Eventually, I accepted that was how he was. The bitterness of Astoria's expression twisted her face into something both ugly and terrifying. But then you came along. And then he moved in. And he turned the entire estate upside down in order to ward it and make sure it was safe. Took you for walks and gave you a tour of the house. She holds Hermione down, hexes her eye, and it hurts a lot. Hermione lost her eye. Malfoy comes in, barges in, he brings Astoria down, literally like flings her across the wall with magic, and then immediately asks Hermione for a healing spell to heal her eye. Stroud comes again, for a checkup, and Hermione is still not pregnant. It's getting worrisome because there's no reason, absolutely no reason for her to not be pregnant, and most girls in the program are already pregnant, and she says that with magic, if both wizards are powerful, the magic might be a little bit more chaotic, therefore it's harder for a magical pregnancy. So Stroud is saying that they are not intimate enough for the pregnancy to set in. So she tells them that they have to start doing it on a bed because she found out that they were doing it on a table. They tell them that they have to start doing it on a bed and make it a little less detached, which is impossible because she's literally being raped, okay? And not doggy style. It was horrible. So they did that, and it was horrible, and she cried, and then right after the deed was done, Malfoy ran to the restroom and started throwing up. And before the next time that they have to do it, she's given a new potion by Stroud, and Stroud basically says, like, this will make things a little bit easier. She takes it not realizing that it's a lust potion. It's cruel. She is given an aphrodisiac, and it's horrible because not only are you being forced into this situation and forced to do this, it warps your mind, trying to like warp this horrible experience into something that she actually likes, which is horrible. And she cries about it on their next time when they're doing it. It says, when he entered her, she gave a small gasp and turned her face towards the wall in despair, writhing with internal anguish. Her body had anticipated it, attuned and waiting. It was ready, wanting. It was such a profound betrayal. Knowing her arousal was physiologically natural didn't ease the guilt. When the rape was clinical, it was endurable. When the rape was drugged, it was endurable. But when it was just her own mind and physiology, it was worst of all. It twisted and tore at something inside her. I'm being and my body's enjoying it, she thought bitterly, and wanted to curl away. She thought she might just vomit. It's horrible. After this experience, after quote unquote, it's so hard for me to like put this into words, like quote unquote enjoying being, she has her own mental thoughts again, and she knows that she's getting Stockholm syndrome. Just feels so lonely, and after all this time being in isolation, even in the manor, the only person that she's had direct contact with that was somewhat nice, even though he's literally her rape, is Malfoy. She's so lonely, and when Malfoy's gone, she waits for him to come back from his work trips. It's just warping everything that she thought about him, and it sucks. Like, she hates it, and she's very aware that she's getting Stockholm syndrome. She was so tired of being all alone. She pressed her lips together. She struggled against crying. Even her memory was a lonely abyss. Almost all the years of the war had been alone. Studying alone in Hogwarts, then studying in Europe, there had been no time for anything but professional relationships. When she'd returned, she practically lived in the hospital ward. There was never time for friendships. When she had any spare time, Harry and Ron were gone on missions. When they were back, it was generally the aftermath of a battle, when Hermione's skills had been most urgently needed. She had so few memories of being with either of them in non-professional circumstances. Malfoy was only bit of warmth and life or human contact she had. Whether he had attended it or not, Hermione was latching onto him in her desperate isolation. She couldn't. He had killed everybody. He had murdered or executed them all. Willing or not, he was raped. She was just a pawn to him. She says this: Malfoy was not the monster she had initially perceived him as being. After learning what happened to the other surrogates, after what Montague tried to do to her, after Astoria, after becoming terrified of what cruelty Lucius Malfoy would devise if her surrogacy was transferred, the person she perceived Malfoy as being had shifted. Being saved by him had affected things, saved from Montague. He touched her. No one had touched her in so long. He'd healed her far more than he needed to. He didn't even want to because he was vomiting after one of the ordeals. Though he insisted his protection of her was entirely born from self-interest because he'd been commanded to, she was almost certain he was far exceeding what obligation demanded. The influence of the manacles also contributed to it too. They had always been intended to cultivate compliance and dependence, to remove her ability to resist. If she could resist Malfoy's violation, if he were physically forcing her down as he did her, it would be easier for her to stop growing resigned and accustomed to it. It was the lying quietly and experiencing it, the anticipation of an inevitability that she had no ability to resist. If the way he hurt her were more voluntary and less obligatory, it would be easier to see him for who he was. Although even then, the mind was cruelly adaptive. The subconscious will to survive was written into humans more deeply than most anything else. Survival didn't require Hermione to be intact, to be decent, to be herself. Survival would carve away any part of her that made enduring harder. It would smooth away the mental anguish, latch onto every glimmer of kindness. It would make life cease to ache. So yeah, that's her little inner monologue of what she feels for Malfoy, what she's contemplating, how lonely she feels, everything. She comes to this realization. She knows she's starting to have feelings for Malfoy, even though she also knows that it's Stockholm syndrome. Malfoy's on a work trip and she's waiting for him to come back. One night he comes back and he's drunk. Hermione has never seen this man drunk before. He says things that don't make sense and then he kisses her. Like what? And she likes it? Question mark? Her eyes widened. He was drunk. She didn't move. He drew nearer until she shuffled backwards, but he kept coming closer until she was trapped against the wall and he was mere inches from her. "Oh, Granger," he sighed, staring down at her. He raised a hand and placed it across her throat, but didn't squeeze. He just left it there. She could feel the heat of it seeping into her skin. She stared up at him. Even drunk, his expression was a mask. He slid his thumb slightly along her neck and she felt her skin prickle. He sighed again. "If I'd known what a pain you'd cause me, I never would have taken you." He just stood there, holding her throat. She could feel her pulse fluttering against his hand. She wasn't sure what he'd meant, if she was supposed to apologize. She could smell the alcohol on his breath. "But," he said after a minute, "at this point, I suppose I deserve to burn. I wonder if you'll burn too." His face was suddenly close to hers. She could feel the air from his words brushing against her skin. His lips crashed into hers. Him being drunk, realizing what he's doing, she starts to like it, like literally moans a little bit, and then that wakes Malfoy the fuck up. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And then he's like taken aback, like, what the fuck did I just do? In some sort of trance or something, like him being drunk put him in his feels. His eyes widened as though he'd just become aware of himself. He stayed there looking shocked for several moments before the mask suddenly clicked into place. His face grew hard and he smirked. "Apparently you have accepted your place," he said with a leer. Then he turned on his heels and vanished into the darkness. So Hermione's thinking, like, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck was that? Why is this man being like it's so weird. So weird, right? I think it's very apparent from the context clues that we're getting that Malfoy and Hermione knew each other in the past in those instances that she cannot remember. But it's still very confusing and we don't know exactly how they know each other or what happened, right? But after this, and after her liking Draco kissing her, or Malfoy kissing her, she is so conflicted. Like, all of these emotions are just bubbling up inside her. She's so conflicted, in self-contradiction, and tries to self-harm herself and bangs her head into the glass and she starts bleeding. She's like bang, 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 hating herself, and just like, it was horrible. There was blood streaming into her eyes, but she kept going again and again. An arm closed around her waist and a hand clasped over both her wrists, and she was dragged away from the glass. She fought, trying to pull her hands free, digging her toes into the grain of the wood floor to push herself back, sobbing. "Granger, don't. Malfoy's voice was close to her ear. She pulled futilely to free herself as she sobbed and sobbed. She was so tired of being hurt and alone. She wanted to be done. She kept existing in that house. She was going to try to find solace, anything but being cold and alone forever and ever. Next time that strap comes, Hermione's pregnant. Ah! Congratulations? I don't know. Hermione's scared that having this baby, somebody will hurt it. Also conflicted with her feelings about Malfoy. No one will hurt it. Calm down. You need to breathe slowly. She leaned into his hand for a moment, resting her head against his chest as she tried to draw a slow breath. Then she froze and tore herself away from him, backing up to the wall. Don't amuse yourself with me, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want your promises or attention in order to maintain my environment. She sobbed faintly under her breath. After all, you made it quite clear how pathetic I'd be to mistake your mandatory care for anything. She wrapped her arms around herself and slid down to the floor, shaking and pressing her mouth closed as her whole body shook. You needn't concern yourself further. I'll take care of myself. You needn't walk me again. Malfoy stared down at her, unmoving for several minutes while she pressed her hand against her mouth and tried to calm her breathing. His hand twitched forward slightly before curling it into a fist and gave a sharp nod and left. She didn't see him again for 3 weeks. So now Hermione's pregnant. She got pregnancy hormones. Because of this, she gets a lot of migraines, gets a lot of morning sickness, has seizures, and one night she wakes up in the middle of the night. All out of nowhere, all of a sudden, she's pregnant. She just remembers that there's something important that she had to remember. Malfoy comes into the room. All of a sudden, a flood of memories come back. And that is the end of part 1, Present of Manacled by SENLINYU. That's the end of this explaining the plot. I just want to do a closing. So overall, I think my explaining the plot is a testament to what kind of work fan fiction is. It's more of a serialized way of writing, like watching a series, than published books are like watching a movie. A lot of the things that happen are very, very slow burn. With fan fiction, they can take their time. A lot of scenes are basically repeats of each other. A little reveal here and a little reveal there with each thing. A lot of the things that happen in this part, she gets R-worded. Healer comes to check in on her. She's not pregnant. Goes to Voldemort. There's a party. She gets R-worded again. Healer comes to check on her. She's not pregnant. Voldemort does the mind shit on her. Like, it's a repeat over and over again. And as she's just living life, you kind of get revealed more and more and more things. Overall, what do I think about this first part of the book and this book as a whole? I think because I'm not a die-hard Harry Potter fan, this book was not absolutely gut-wrenchingly devastating to me like everybody has been saying. Did I cry a lot? Yes, I absolutely sobbed my eyes out reading this. I just think that it was a little too long. By the time I was finished with the book, it took too long for me to really feel all of the emotions come to me at once, where I had to contemplate my life after reading it. Do I think the book is good? Absolutely. I really do believe it is worth reading, and I think it is a really, really well-written book. I have to say that if you watch this explaining the plot, what I explained is not even an ounce of what you will feel while you read it. The feeling that you get while reading it is in the writing. It's not in the story. It is in the way that the characters feel and how much you deeply, deeply care for them. So yeah, this is just part 1. And part 1 of this over 1,000-page book, that was already like a book within itself. That was over 300 pages worth of words. My next video is going to be a part 2. It's going to be explaining the plot, part 2 of Manacled by SENLINYU, and it's going to be the flashbacks. And we are going to get all of the memories that come flooding back to Hermione that she is hiding in her head. We understand what those memories are in this flashback. That's basically it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you liked it. Please let me know if you want me to do other kinds of videos and things like that. I'd love to hear it from you. If you've ever read Manacled, let me know what you thought of it. Like, it's very depressing and there's a lot of triggers, but it's a very conflicting book to think about. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in part 2.